I remember hearing a guy named Tony Campolo, and actually we're going to watch a clip from him in just a second. And he was talking about when he was called, I'm working on it. He said when he was a young man at the time of Vietnam, he was wrestling with whether he should join the Air Force for the war. And he really wrestled with this as a Christian, because he had some people saying, as a Christian, this is what you're supposed to do. You support the government and do what in the war. And he said, yeah, he saw these things that Jesus was saying, and he didn't know what to do with it. So he said he went down to the recruiter's office, and he was hoping that maybe that would help him. He's just wrestling with it. And the guy there, at the recruiter's office, he's trying to figure out what's going on with him. And finally he says, what's the problem? What is it you're trying to figure out? He says, I'm trying to figure out if Jesus would drop napalm from a plane on a village. The guy goes, oh, that's stupid. Everybody knows Jesus would never do that. Right? He says, why is it as Christians we struggle with this? And I think sometimes, maybe especially if we've grown up in the church or a church culture, we've been taught, like Mara was talking about, that you think about Jesus this way, we kind of put those things aside that he says, and we never wrestle with them. And I found this, in the church, it's hard sometimes, when we ever had the national holidays, we lift all these things up, and we never question. And when I was growing up, I didn't go to church, but I started reading the Bible on my own. And I think there's something to that, because, Mara is actually an atheist, and sometimes they take someone from outside our faith to actually help us see, the things that we often don't see. In fact, I remember in college, we were in this Bible study, and the leader of the group was saying, it's most interesting when you have groups of non-Christians, like people who go to China to meet with people, because they see things in the Bible that we don't see, because we've been taught not to look for it, right? So, I started reading the Bible on my own, and I can remember when I was 18, and especially guys, this, what happens when you're on your 18th birthday? What do you have to go down and do for the government? You have to register, select a service. And what happens if you don't do that? But it's not that you get arrested. It's like if you want college financial aid or any of those things to have a good life, what we call a good life, you can't get that. So you have to register, which if we ever have war, that you can be drafted and sent. And you don't even think about how powerful it is to say, basically takes so much away from you if you don't do this. And I really wrestled with that. My mom told me, she said, I thought you were going to go to jail. All right? But, I read the Bible without having someone tell me this is what Jesus meant by that. And I remember when I went to college, I was really big in that evangelical circle. In that circle of understanding, like, people are saved if you accept Jesus, you say the right prayer, right? And you go to heaven. And we had this class on ethics, and we were talking about war, and could we kill in war? And I remember thinking about this, and said, well, I know I'm saved because I've accepted Jesus, right? I'm going to heaven, but I don't know if that person is. So wouldn't it be better if I let them shoot me because I know I'm going to heaven and they still have the chance to accept Jesus, right? You believe that. But I can remember the first time I had the experience of in my adult life seeing war break out was the Gulf War. Maybe you remember the Gulf War. And what really was hard for me is I was wrestling with, as Christians, how do we respond to this? Is this right? Is it not? And listening to the Christian radio station, and basically they said, I can't believe anybody as a Christian would even question this, because as Christians we have to support the government whatever they do. Right. And I'm like, wow, how do you deal with that? And I'm going to play, this is actually from Tony Campolo. I showed the story. It's a 2-minute clip, and some of these shares it came from Philip Yancey.
Let's listen to this. A story that will get some of your skeptics turned on to what I'm trying to say. Phil Yancey told me this story. He was having dinner with a man who had been in World War II. And the man was talking about the fact that he was in the Battle of the Bulge and was a special unit that was sent out every morning to kill the wounded German prisoners. The Battle of the Bulge was so chaotic and blow their brains out. He comes upon this German soldier who's sitting with his back against the tree, completely dissipated. He's not wounded. He's just too tired to move. He's there just limp. Philip said, my friend came up to him and raised his gun and was about to shoot him, and the man said, wait a minute, in perfect English. Give me just a moment to pray. The guy with the gun said, "Are you a Christian?" He said, "Yes." He said, "I'm a Christian too." And they sat down together. And he said, the man said, "We opened the scriptures and actually shared some scripture with each other and prayed with each other. And he showed me his family pictures, and I showed him my family pictures, and we prayed for each other's families. It was a beautiful time." And Philip kept on pressing him and say, "And what did you do? And what did you do?" So I stood up. I looked at him and I said, "You're a Christian, and I'm a Christian. I'll see you in heaven." And I blew his brains out. When I tell that story, there's always a stunned reaction, because the sense is that the guy's going to say, "Oh, I can't kill you because I'm a Christian brother." Oh, no. No, that's what militarism is. You forget your spiritual values. You forget that you're shooting a Christian brother. You forget that Jesus Christ is in that person, and that what you do to that person, you're doing to Jesus Christ himself. That's what militarism does. It makes nationalism more important than the...
Cut off there. You click the next one. Any reactions to that? No. You know, not putting these things out here to, to say that the way everybody else has thought is wrong. I think that we need is for us to wrestle with things. And for me, this really came home when he's talking about the struggle we have between the call we hear in the life of Jesus and what we are faced is people who are live in this country. And this really came home to me when I was in an internship. And I think I've shared with some of you the story, but that's okay. Most Sundays during my internship, I had to be up front and, part of leading worship. This Sunday in particular, I wasn't there. There were two pastors, and actually had a college intern too. I was a seminary intern. That's when I actually got to sit with Christy and Joshua in the pews. It was like two. And the co-pastor, his son, had disappeared the night before. He was in his mid to late teens, and it's about the time that things like schizophrenia and other mental illnesses began to sit in, and he was struggling with this, and he had medication that he had not been taking, and he had disappeared the night before, and no one in his family knew where he was. And his father was preaching that Sunday, and in this church, it's a big sanctuary, and there's a big pulpit, and next to the pulpit was the American flag, and the other side was a church flag. And during the middle of the services, he was preaching, his son happened to come in from the back of the church. And he came and sat in the front row, and he was kind of moving like you could tell something wasn't quite right. And in the middle of the sermon, he got up and he pushed the flag over on the ground. One of the ushers who was up there just kind of quietly got up and stood it back up. The young man went right back up again and pushed it on the ground again. And now, my understanding was that people in the congregation knew, something about this. It's hard as that, when you're a pastor, for people not to know things about your family, this journey. But the older gentleman who had fought in World War II, I remember him telling me all his stories, about these days, came rushing up from the back of the church, and he decked this kid in the middle of worship. And then the ushers and his father grabbed him and kind of pulled him out. And it's funny, the only person who kept their head was a college intern, because Reggie, my supervisor, the pastor, he was shocked. I was shocked. It was just, we could roll on and help finish worship, and so we let it. We were just completely thrown off. And the thing that really got me about it was, here's this kid who's mentally ill, and in the middle of worship, someone would actually deck him in front of a cross with a crucified Jesus on it, who dies forgiving rather than striking back. And we decked this mentally ill kid in the middle of worship because the kid had pushed the flag down on the country that he was told loved, and it was more important to him than the way of Jesus that we invited to that congregation. And it really hit me, that I don't think we wrestle enough with this as people in our country. I mean, even with the pledge, we talk about a nation under God, which implies that God comes first. But I don't really think we act that way. And I want to really invite us to wrestle with this as people of faith. What is it that Jesus calls us to live in our community, and how does that create tension? Because it's easier when we take that mindset of the two kingdom kind of thing we talked about last week, where there's God's realm and there's Caesar's realm, and in Caesar's realm, or the government's realm, we do what the government says, and in God's realm, we do God's. And this is spiritual, and this is the real world. But when you read Jesus isn't saying that. He isn't saying, there's Caesar's and God. He's really saying this. It's like, if you render to Caesar what's Caesar, and to God what's God's, well, what does God own? everything. And if everything belongs to God, then nothing belongs to Caesar. I want to invite you not to wrestle just because I want you just for a second think about the life of Jesus. And we're going to just play these are some action from the movie The Passion of the Christ. And I want you to look at it and think about the way of Jesus and open yourself to say, what is it that Jesus is inviting us